I used
Perfect. So I am Flora, and Deloitte is our other group mate, and we were able to review the training manual you created for our team. We sent it over the written feedback. Were you able to review that?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So in the first part of the purpose, we introduced what is the training, what it would be on. So it would be beneficial to include what kind of differential reinforcement to introduce to the trainees. So, for example, differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. So in this part, I think that it was included differential reinforcement. So we just thought it would just make it a little stronger to include which kind, which I think you all selected differential reinforcement of alternative at the end. And that would be for the purpose of section, for the purpose section. You all did a great job connecting the code of ethics to each section. And I would just add additional code of ethics connections to make sure this section is stronger. So this is just to make it a little bit stronger. The ones that were included did connect and were really well written as well. All right, so the next section, the trainer qualifications. The information you listed might not match the experience the BCBA who has been in this role for a year for the trainer number. So the qualifications you gave were very specific, and it is great of a BCBA to have. We just thought that maybe a year was insufficient to have all those qualifications. So maybe even like 3 years might be sufficient. And in the first year, a lot of BCBAs are just getting comfortable with the job, is why we thought that as well. When you described trainer 1 and trainer 2, we just wanted to see a little more description. For example, when you say extensive knowledge of training, just letting us know like what is the extensive knowledge and training, what would that look like, and what does it look like to you and your requirements. So this could be interpreted differently with other people or whoever's reading it. That's why we were thinking of that. And then we did notice like you did an awesome job just explaining the diversity. So there was a paragraph description of the trainers, and we have it right here, and we have it listed. You described why it's important for them to use common language, and also that diversity of a second person, the second trainer to have diverse knowledge to make sure that they are capable of training the staff. So that was pretty awesome to read so early on in your training manual. All right, so the next section is for the client and student population. So it was important that you noted having a fallback procedure for those who don't usually need a higher support, and procedures in the instances what they do. The ethic codes numbers were missing the code words. So what this was just like, for example, the code 4.08, it would be best if we write 4.08 considerations regarding punishment procedures. So this just to add a little bit easier for the reader so they know which code it was. And they should be knowledgeable on the codes, but just having the title would be helpful for them as well. And then the settings. So you provided detailed descriptions of the clinic settings and the areas, which was really nice. So you also, not only the setting itself, but the areas, how each area would look. It's important that you mention the food allergies with regard to edible reinforcers. This shows that you took into account individual treatments. For this one, the ethic codes listed are relevant to the setting, and just to assure that you are using the most recent codes. So I think it was just for this section, or maybe there was one or two that we were using the previous one. So just remember, although we currently are following the old code of ethics for this class, they asked us to use the one that will take effect January 22nd. But that would be, I think we only saw it for this section as well. This staff description. So the description on their background is in depth and mindful of their backgrounds and their current limitations would to be. So we thought this section was very well written, and the description was very helpful to see. And you just took into consideration all the limitations, which is really great. And then we have the training objectives. You have done a great job with the training objectives. You should also include some knowledge on the vocabulary used for the training here. So trainees would have to demonstrate that they understand all the jargon used during their training a little bit more. In addition, the pre-test should be accompanied with the post-test in this section so that the comparison can be made from where the trainees were before the training in comparison to where they were after the training. In addition, include how many opportunities they will have to pass the role play. So, for example, just letting them know trainees will have the opportunity to apply the feedback or something around those lines. It was a little bit unclear if the staff will model what they have learned during coaching and feedback and if it will be tested. So the word modeling should be removed so that it's not confused with BST step modeling. It was a little bit unclear in that part, just differentiating between both. And you pointed out the importance of being able to implement differential reinforcement with the function of escape. But I would change the wording of the explanation because it suggests that the trainee would be able to identify the function, but this is just something that the BCBA would have done or the trainer would have done prior to the intervention. So just clarifying that so it doesn't assume that the trainee will have to be able to do that. And then we're going into the training methods. So just the overview. The first part is the PSI. So the PSI included great background description. It was easy to read and understand. You did a good job starting with the definition, then going into the background of PSI and the components of it. We liked how you included each component with the description. This was a solid introduction to the topic of PSI. We would wanted to see a little bit more literature that supported the PSI for training differential reinforcement. So just connecting those to the training and how we would use it. And if you couldn't find any that was relevant to the direct care staff or even the staff or the clients we serve, then it would be good to address that as a limitation. So even if we include literature that wasn't fully relevant, but they were using differential reinforcement, that we could say, it was a limitation that our staff didn't match theirs, but they were using differential reinforcement. And for modeling, there was a proper use of citations within the subsection. There was one sentence where it said trainees will be providing an opportunity to perform skills after. After the sentence, I would add that this will be done during role modeling, just to clarify. I think this would add clarity to this section. In this subsection, you could use more background from the literature as well. So it was just what we saw and we read was very well written. So just to make it a little bit stronger in making sure that the citation of the literature is included. So just referencing with in-text citation just to avoid plagiarism as well. And then more information and examples of limitations of modeling as well as comparison of your training to the ones you're referencing. So it was the same with just making sure we are able to connect the staff we're serving to the staff from the literature. And if that wasn't, we weren't able to do that, just to make sure to report it as a limitation. And then we have the role play and the coaching and feedback. So for role play, great job explaining the role play. We would just suggest that you should highlighting similarities and things that weren't similar between participants in the study that used and the current trainees. For example, educational background. The findings of the studies examined can be used to show that the role play is effective when it's used in the training tool. And you can include some background information from the literature review here. So for example, mention why the studies were conducted and what they were conducted for. You could mention also limitations of the studies and how they impact the use of role play or why or why not. And adding a conclusion for the overall benefits of role play to train. So just making sure how we connect it to the training. The feedback given for role play also applies for coaching and feedback. So again, just that literature connection. It was the paragraphs that were included were well written, but we just started elaborating on those and also to increase the information that was there. And then we have training acceptability. So it was so great to see that you all had an icebreaker. That was a great idea, and that was awesome to see it in the beginning of the training. It was we were excited to see that, and also the importance to consider our staff that rides the bus. It was nice to see that that was considered, and allowing the time and flexibility for them to arrive. It was good to see that regardless of their arrival time, they were gonna all receive a pen and a notebook, so you were not excluding anyone depending on their arrival, because sometimes tardiness is due to their transportation. In this section, I would provide a little more detail on how you are making your materials more available for or relatable for the direct care staff. And the vocabulary is a good start, but also mention the reading levels, the visuals, how much information it will be on the PSI, how many opportunities will be given to observe modeling. So just a little bit more details that were included also in just the requirements that we thought we could be included in this section. Great job considering that direct care staff may not have been exposed to the technical language being used, but keep in mind that the manual is for the trainers, not the direct care staff. So you might mention that you will provide handouts of the vocabulary list. Also mention that the material section is located in as well. So just letting them know where the materials will be. And then there was a scale that was used here, the Likert scale. So I would just provide a little bit of information, since we mentioned it, on what it was. And then we have the next one is training timeline. So the timeline, so considering assigning part of the training after the trainees have been given feedback, for them to have the opportunity to apply the feedback and rehearse before they are tested. So that was just a suggestion that we thought might be helpful. And also, reinforcers mentioned in the modeling and role play scenarios are not included in the material list. So just making sure to include the reinforcement intangibles in the list as well. It was so detailed, and it was well written. All the information for the FA and the FBAs, and you explained the components of each. There was a lot of really good information here, but there wasn't a lot of citing for it. So for this section, I would just review and reference all the sources, even if it was books or articles, wherever we might have found it, just to make sure that it makes it a little bit stronger, and again, avoid plagiarism for that part. But the information that was included was correct, and it was I know that it can be found in one of the articles or the Cooper book. All right, and then the overview of the intervention. So differential reinforcement of lower levels is described in detail. So breaking it up in the first paragraph into two would make it a little bit easier to read. I think for this part too, initially you mentioned differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, and then it goes into differential reinforcement of lower rates. So just being cautious with that. I know that initially we started with the same DRA, but then we had to switch it per our professor when she let us know DRA wasn't available. All right, so choosing between differential reinforcement and non-contingent reinforcement, you did an awesome job in providing examples of ableism. You have written a clear paragraph, and the reader can easily have a clear understanding of what ableism is. And you also discuss how to prevent it from happening, which was really awesome. In this section, there were a few comments from the original template that were provided. So just make sure before the final, you just delete those. That was just a small thing that we observed. And then in the explanation of using NCR versus DR, it is clear and informative to the reader to make sure this section is stronger and avoid, again, plagiarism, just making sure that in text citations included or where the information was found was just also included on there. So for the vocabulary, I think you skipped one, Deloy, sorry. So for the vocabulary, it was just very simple. The definitions were very well written and in your own words, avoiding plagiarism. So in this section, I think there was just some words that have been used in the training manual that weren't included in the vocabulary list. So we listed those just as a precaution to make sure those are included for knowledge. And then we have the client outcomes. For the client outcomes, diversity is very important and should be incorporated in the training manual to reflect the community where the clinic is located. Names can be used in the examples of the graphs. So just for this one with making sure the graph, I think we can label some of the points as well, the data points, to make it a little stronger graph. And then an example of names on the graphs to make it a little bit stronger. So with greater detail, for the instructors may not agree on what inappropriate is. So I think that this was included in one of the definitions. So just making sure we're cautious with some of the words like inappropriate, where it could be interpreted differently per different people. And then with the measuring systems, it is a target behavior, more of a target on volume and outbursts of the actual words. So what if the person whispers or things like that? And also there was, I think one of the examples was what if we were to say that inappropriate was "you are so dumb" versus whatever you were considering it to be inappropriate. Just that clarity amongst the definitions as well. And I think that there was a comment for frequency. So I think for the measuring systems, we could definitely use frequency, and we should, but elaborate on that. So frequency of a behavior for what period of time. In the session time changes for each interval or sessions, then maybe consider a rate instead of frequency. And explaining the graphs, what types of graphs did you use and why. All right, and then the references, it's mentioned in the beginning to be located in section 4 of the paper, but then it's located at the end of the appendix. So just making sure to locate it where it was said to be located for the reader to find. And the knowledge and acquisition test, just rewarding the introduction to reiterate that assessments could be given as a pre-test and a post-test. So it was really well, the test had enough questions, and the answer kit was also provided, which was good. For the PSI, you provide a good content, and it was ideally for the PSI, the content has to be presented in a way that could be a little more appealing to the trainer. So for example, adding a little less wording on the slides. There was a few slides that had a lot of the writing on it, and where it could be a little bit overwhelming for the reader. And as you know, with the PSI, it should be a little bit easier to take their time and things like that. And then we can always include images to really help. The other thing with the PSI was including additional examples of DRA. So just including examples of the intervention to make it a little bit easier for the reader to be able to visualize it, since they haven't applied it yet. That would have been helpful for the trainees. And then we have modeling. Modeling is performed by the trainer to help the direct care staff on a new skill, but this was not clear during the section, so just clarifying if who's going to be doing the modeling a little bit more. And you did a great job with the scenarios, breaking down the scenarios into the script format. It made it easier for the trainer to refer to it. You use first step to identify. Although this is critical step, I would also take caution in including it, because identifying a behavior function could be done by the BCBA. So again, just to that, with saying something like identifying the what intervention, since that's going to be provided by the BCBA. And then for role play, the clients are not informed of what is going to happen with the reinforcers at the start of the session. So just including that to make it a little bit stronger. And the trainer instructions are very detailed, and it includes some aspects of the training acceptability. For the coaching and performance feedback, it was well organized, the treatment integrity checklist, and the introductions are brief and clear. You mentioned here that the trainee will identify target behaviors. This will already have done by the direct care staff or the trainer, which is the BCBA will have this done for the staff prior to the training. And the checklist should focus on the steps for the treatment that you selected as well. With the annotated bibliography, you did a great job with formatting and giving full citation. So I think it was just in the beginning where the citation was not a complete citation. I think it was just the title. So just making sure that it's the entire citation of the articles. And then for the training acceptability tools, all the main topics were addressed. So make it clear that you are not only looking for positive feedback. You can do this by making some statements in the negative. So something like, I did not feel comfortable asking a trainer questions while in a group setting. And also breaking down your questions a little more. This tool is used to improve future training. So something like, instead of asking general questions about all the materials, break it down per materials. And then additional feedback, I think it's just an overview to making sure we're citing all the things so we get full points for everything and avoid plagiarism, and extend the literature for all sections, and that would be our main points. So at this point, I know I had all of the sections, but do you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you need clarification on?
I don't think so. That was all very good feedback that we'll definitely be able to discuss with our group and then apply it to our final draft of this training assignment.
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions either. That was all really helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you.